And welcome back, everybody, to the Hunt Nebraska cabin. We got another full house in here, but thank you for inviting us into your home, your office, your car, your truck, wherever you might be headed. Shucks, you might be headed out to the turkey woods while you're listening to this downloaded podcast. We appreciate that. Real quick, Hunter, from our Hunter education side of things, he's in the studio. Kayla's pushing the button. I'm Hershey, and then across the way, the gentleman that's probably going to be doing most of the talking on this, because he definitely brought the most props into the studio. That is Jeff Rollinson, all with the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission today, folks. And this is obviously something that, well, if you're watching us on YouTube, you're going to get the full effect. If you're just listening to the audio of this, you might want to jump over to the YouTube side and give it a view once you get back from the field. So you can see all the bounty that Jeff has pulled out of his driver's door, just the driver's door on his truck.
Definitely impressive.
It is impressive. There's a lot of steel there. One of the things that we've been kind of kicking around for some time, we've danced around this topic, right? When we did our original How to Deer episode, we talked about it. We talked a little bit about it last spring during turkey hunting season as well, but we've never really donated a whole show, spent a whole show talking about the steel, the sharp steel that's used out in the field.
A big deal. I mean, it can make or break a hunt sometimes.
At least 25% of the room agrees with you today, Jeff. So, I mean,
and that's why you bring them all.
Well, no. This I went to the old cabinet, the old hunting cabinet in the basement, and I pulled out just a few that represent some different blades, different steels, different handles, that kind of thing.
Well, I'm glad somebody read the email on what this podcast was about. I'll put this one back in my pocket.
I tell you right now.
No. Hunter, before you do that,
knife is important.
Please show our listeners and for our audio folks, describe the contribution you brought to the table today.
Well, I'm a buck knife loyalist, and we got a 3-blade pocket knife. That's my daily carry pocket knife.
Now, for the YouTubers, kind of show that up. You might have to get it real close to the camera. We might have to zoom into that.
Nothing
that definitely fits in a pocket.
It doesn't stand out next to Jeff's, but when it's sitting on a table alone, it stands out.
You forgot about that.
You don't have a pocket knife in your pocket?
I rarely carry a knife nowadays.
Pocket knife?
Purse knife?
That'll do.
To be honest with you, I'm an enabler. I have a lot of knives for other people. I've got them for all my family members, my
These
extended
all
family.
came from Hershey right here.
I know that during the day that you and Hunter have got me covered, and if Kayla's around and she's carrying her purse, and we're good. So I really don't have much need for a knife. It's the old Bach method of getting in and out of the deer woods, right? What's the best vehicle? My buddies.
Wow.
So we're going to get into this. I think we are going to talk about some of the different uses and maybe a little bit about the steel, because I think most people get to the gun spot there at Shields or Cabela's or even the department stores, wherever you might be going, and you just kind of look, oh, that one looks cool. Oh, look at the shape of that one. Oh, look at that one. That's got blaze orange, and I'm deer hunting this weekend. Oh, that's camouflage. I'm turkey hunting. There's a lot of different things that go into it, the shape, the size, the use. And I know, folks, you're going to have your own thoughts and opinions on which ones you like, so make sure you comment down below to give us some ideas. But we got a plethora. So let's kind of go through some of the different styles first. And we've got a decent amount here. But let's do the styles and what they might excel at. So let's start just from your left to right, Jeff.
Well, I mean, and again, pocket knife. Everybody should have a pocket knife in the pocket, because I probably use this pocket knife more than all of my other knives combined on an annual basis.
I completely agree. Of all your knives that I've used, that's the one probably the most.
You've used this the most. I know you have. This one here is a D2 steel blade with a gut hook on it.
Before you get into the steel type, let's just go through the kind of the blade type.
Yeah. And so this is kind of a little bit of a straight blade, just almost a smidge of a drop point blade, but it's got a real swept type front to the blade, and so you would utilize this knife. This is a great skinning knife as well as a gut hook. So this does all your chores on a deer from start to finish.
And I'm going to try to get you to hold them up a little bit towards the camera for those watching on YouTube.
Yeah, this one here was it's got my name on it too. I just think that's kind of cool, so I don't forget whose knife it is. Another one here. Now this is a swept blade. You could say that it's a skinning blade, if you will, and it really is. This was made by an old game warden friend of mine who's no longer with us, an incredibly good guy, Eric Wiebe. This swept blade here, some people have called it a butter knife, some people have called it a skinning knife, but the swept blade here with the real muted tip allows for skinning and a lot of camp chores without having that needle point tip that can get in the way and cause problems, especially when you're skinning. And so it's just a type of design that gives you a little more room for error when you're out there in the field.
And for those who don't know what a swept blade is, it has more of a curvature to it. So if you think of your normal butter knife, it's pretty straight and narrow. It doesn't have any curvature to it. The one that Jeff just pulled out, the one that's really swept, it has a little curve to it. It's not straight, but it's not a full J. It
just has a nice swept blade, and of course, as you're making the stroking motion of skinning an animal, that sweep, that bend in the blade, if you will, gives you a nice cutting stroke, so that you're not poking holes or tearing the meat or the hide, but you're able to pull back hide and just keep skinning and just keep wiping that blade down. This one here is made by a buddy of mine who makes knives, and he does a great job with both handles and knives. Boy, this is almost like a straight blade, straight edge blade. It's got a heck of a point to it, a little bit of a sweep to it. This is just a general purpose utility knife. And as you can see, this one here, if you're skinning with this, that tip is so pointed and sharp that it really can get in the way at times. Hangs up, you can hang up if you're really going fast. It can hang up on the hide or the meat or whatnot. But for a general camp and utility knife, or just a general hunting knife, it's hard to beat. Of course, your fillet knives, real straight edge type knife, and of course these long blades, lots of tang or bendability to the blades. They're very flexible. Any fillet knife should be flexible. Probably if my pocket knife is the most used knife in my arsenal, the fillet knives that I have are the second most used knives in the arsenal. So these are just about as handy as can be. Here we have kind of a drop point, maybe a drop or a clip point blade. This is a real common blade, the sharp finger, if you will. As you can see, it's got a real swipe to it here, and the blade, the point drops down and then comes back up. And again, what it does is it brings the tip out of the way just a little bit. If the tip was straight like this one, you can see the differences in the tip compared to one that has a straight tip, straight blade. And by bending that tip back a little bit, you get a little more utility out of the knife for gutting chores, for caping or what have you, without that tip getting in the way. But this drop point, what it does is it really gives you the ability to have a nice sharp tip, but it just kind of drops it out of the way a little bit so that it's not in the way. This is a small caping knife. Again, a straight tip, a straight knife, but real small blade. I've said this many times, 2.5 to 3 inch blade is about all you really need in the field for just about 99.9% of all your hunting, big game and small game. And this one here has gotten a lot of use, as has this little sharp finger over the years. But they're just real handy knives. Not a lot of blade to have to sharpen, so easy to keep sharp. And This one here, tip can get in the way a little bit. You just have to be a little bit more careful. But again, a real good general purpose knife. Some of these have like a groove for your finger. It depends on the type of the knife. Some of it are back behind the blade. Some of these are right up against the base of the blade. But they just give you that ability so that when a knife is getting used, it should get wet, right? I mean, it should get wet. And so having something to keep so you can do intricate work, but you're controlling the blade without your finger sliding up into the blade can be pretty darn important. Here you can see similar features so that your fingers don't slide up into the blade. So a lot of different types.
It is, and it's like any tool. It's one of those things that need kind of facilitated design and concepts. And what's unique is people kind of get to what they like. Whether it's a blade shape, blade design, the flexibility, and how stiff that spine or blade is, how fine it is. Hands are another thing. It's probably like a lot of things, probably along the lines of shooting handguns or pistols, in that some people like a thinner grip. Some people like a little thicker grip. And you talked about that thumb groove and where you can catch it. Some are, like you said, incorporated into the handle. Some are incorporated into the blade itself. Kind of depends on the purpose and what you're up to. Which is kind of neat because we like to use a lot of different knives. And in fact, I'm guessing for a lot of hunters, we end up with a lot of different styles of blades. Sometimes different blades that are designed for the same thing, but we want to kind of mess around with it and figure out which ones are the best. But we have a lot of different needs for it. Like you mentioned, Jeff, from skinning to deboning to pulling out back straps on deer or cutting around the keel on a mallard and all that type of stuff. So really kind of cool. Now, I stopped you because I know you like to get into the actual steel of the blade. And that's something I don't think a lot of folks really think much about. I think they just assume if I pay more for a blade, it's going to have better steel. Mm-hmm. It's going to be, but not all steel's made the same. I mean, they've got pros and cons. It's kind of like shotgun shells. You got to kind of pull from here to make this happen. You can have a blade that holds a really good edge. Probably not going to be the easiest to sharpen. The really soft ones that don't hold a blade or an edge at all, no problem. I mean, you can get that razor sharp in just a few swipes with the hone. We'll talk about sharpening and keeping them sharp here in a bit. But let's kind of dive into the different types of steel. What are some of the most common steel types in a blade? You know,
and it's hard to even say that anymore because there's so many different types of steels out there, different technology. You're generally paying for, and I'll probably screw this up, but the carbon content of the blade is going to dictate a lot of the hardness, and so you're generally paying for that. Now, the most common blade in the United States, most common steel is probably going to be 440 stainless steel. Yeah, and 440 stainless steel is a good medium hard steel that's found in a lot of knife blades, especially pocket knives and whatnot. Sheath knives do a lot of 440. But like you said, Hershey, there's a trade-off, right? Most people don't want this knife blade right here that I have on some of these custom knives. They want 440 because when it comes time to put an edge on it, it's not hard to put an edge on it. And most sharpeners that you'll have at home, whether you use a stone or a machine sharpener or whatever, strap belt, whatever the case may be, they'll sharpen fairly easily. They'll hold an edge for a length of time, but they probably won't allow you to do an entire deer. I mean, you're going to have to, if you want to keep that razor sharp edge, you're going to be doing some touch-up work with a 440 stainless blade. If you're picky, like I am, about blade sharpness, I'm of the opinion that if you're going to do a job, your knife should be sticky sharp, just razor sharp. And when it's not sticky sharp anymore, it's time to touch it up because it just does the job so much safer and so much better. D2 steel, we'll just jump right into something that's really hard. Tool steel is designed not to break. It's designed to be really hard. And some of these blades that I have here have D2 steel in them, and they're really, really hard. And they're going to hold an edge. Some of these blades I have used a couple seasons, and I haven't really had to sharpen them. The downside of that, when it comes time to sharpen them, you got to know what you're doing. You don't get away with any error when it comes to sharpening D2, because it's going to take you, if it takes you, just to touch up something that's 440 stainless, if it takes you 4, 5, 6 strokes on either side to touch that up, D2, if you're just doing strokes on a stone, it could take you 20, 30 strokes. It could take you much more if you don't know how to do the angles correctly. So, but the benefit is they hold an edge just incredibly well. This particular one here has a D2 with a nitrogen treatment on it, which gives it the glossy, as you can see, it has a real glossy finish to it, and that just protects the blade a little bit more, and I believe it adds a little hardness to it as well on the blade, but and just gives it a nicer, glossier finish to it. There's a chromium blades. Again, the amount of carbon in the blade in chromium blades, it'll usually give you the amount of carbon in the name of the chromium steel that's used. The 420, 430 stainless. And so the list goes on and on. There's just a lot of different types out there. My advice is, if you know how to sharpen a blade and you have a good sharpener, don't shy away from D2 or harder or similar strength metals, because they're going to be great in the field. If you're not one that likes sharpening blades or you're not real confident, go with 440 stainless, and just about any sharpener on the market will keep a 440 stainless fairly sharp.
And I was going to say some of the harder steels also require a little bit more maintenance and upkeep. Corrosion resistance sometimes goes down.
Correct.
On certain, and perhaps that's why the coating. I don't know what the nitrogen coating does to it, but it's one of those things that if you're like me and you use it and then you wash it and you put it away until next season, that might not be a bad time to, like you say, go with the 440C or something along those lines. And I got to say, that's probably, would you say that's probably, if you're just getting into it, a good spot to start?
I would say it's a great spot to start. Easy to, like I said, easy to sharpen, easy to maintain, razor sharp. You can get them razor sharp, and like I said, they'll last a long time, especially in pocket knives. I mean, I don't sharpen my pocket knife but once every few months, but or when somebody borrows it and gives it back and says, "Hey, that's dull," and then I put an edge back on it.
Well, yeah, it's no longer
and that's
for
that was a 6-inch blade, so I sharpened it a lot. It's down to not much of a blade anymore.
6-inch blade,
so it's gotten some
hardly
use.
fit in his pocket.
It's gotten some use, but overall, you pay what you get what you pay for. Now, there are some steels from overseas. I tend to stay away from some of those steels just because if I don't know the carbon content of steel, I probably am going to shy away because I've had problems with some of those cheaper metals. You can buy a knife for $14, and you might have a $14 knife, right? So.
Yeah. And that might be what you need. It just kind of depends on what project you're doing as well, and how much it's really got to work.
Yeah.
Scalpels, one of the sharpest things as far as knives, are made from some of the skinniest, thinnest blades, and they're just not meant to last.
They throw
After
them away.
a couple of cuts, they're done.
And most deer hunters, a lot of deer hunters, I'd say, if all you're going to do is gut one deer a year, I mean, you're not boning it out or anything, you're just gutting one deer a year and then taking it to the processor, you don't need a $120 knife to gut a deer a year. It'll be razor sharp every time you gut that one deer. So,
and the one thing I toss out is if you go to the store and you find some of those that are really, hey, this is this type of steel from Austria or anything along those lines, I'd do a quick search on it briefly. We all got a way to do that nowadays just to see what that might entail. It might be wonderfully hard, and like you said, first 2-3 years, not a problem. But you bring it back and all of a sudden it's a pain in the butt to bring it back. Broadheads, I often think of it that way. There's the three that I know of. I'm a Muzzy guy because I wasn't really into the sharpening idea, and so as soon as they go bad, I replace them. My son got into the Magnus heads, and my goodness, you can get those wonderfully sharp. It's not a super hard steel by any means, but with just a couple of strokes with a little hand sharpener, man, you can shave your arm hairs right off, Kayla. On the opposite side, the Montec, that G5, that thing, they had to do videos, create special tools,
show you how to sharpen it,
and to sharpen that puppy. And once you got it, not much that could compare to it. But there were a lot of folks that never had the patience or the ability to figure it out, because that was an angle thing as well. And once you fold that angle or that blade over, that can be kind of tough. But
Yep. No, and I like to sharpen blades, so I don't shy away from that. So I did like the Montec for a lot of years, but I'm not sharpening broadheads anymore. There's just too much technology, too many good scalpel like blades out there.
And unfortunately, they don't come with a handle.
No,
and they're just small.
They're small.
Room for error.
There's too much room for error. Yeah, I'm not into sharpening broadheads these days, but what a broadhead it was. So and so then you get into handles, and handles become everything you could want in a grip. You know me. I customize my handguns for hunting. I customize the grip angles to match my hand, which to me results in superior accuracy. I think the same thing with knife handles. I think you can get all kind of customized handles. I don't customize them to my hand. I just I find handles that fit good or whatnot, and that works for me. And I've put some down that I didn't like the way they fit in my hand, and I just never did buy them. So, but you can get handles made out of all kinds of materials, and they all have different purposes. But here's one thing I'd remind you: a hunting knife is going to get wet. If you're in a deer cavity, it's going to be a wet knife. And so I would not be as comfortable. This is a great utility knife, but I don't want to have this in my hands on a frozen cold day when my hands can't even hardly feel my hands inside a deer cavity working, because there's just no protection for my hand on this one. If my hand slips up, there's nothing there to stop it. But it's a great handle. I mean, deer antler wood. It's a great
Very neat
handle.
looking, yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful for a utility knife. But when my hand is inside a deer cavity, I want to feel the back of that knife blade so that I know that my hand's not going to slip on it. And so, there's just, rubber, plastic materials. This one here is laminate wood. I picked this wood out myself from Eric Wiebe when he made this knife for me. Yeah, and I just love the blue and the green. So it's just, it's just a laminate wood, but he's got it so smooth and rounded, it just fits the metal like a glove, custom made, and of course it should. This fillet knife here is just a kind of a black plastic handle, very close to micarta. I like micarta handles. I don't know if I brought anything that has micarta on it. This would be maybe considered by some that didn't know if it was plastic to be a micarta, but micarta is just a series of linen layers that are produced into a solid basically, and then once they're solid, they're just honed down to nice smooth, and they're black or white or all kinds of, can be different colors, but they're about as hard as it gets, and so they're a really great handle for guns, pistol stocks, and for knife handles. And then plastic or rubber. This one here, tell me about whose is this? Whose is this one?
That belongs to the state of Nebraska. That was actually donated with some other hunting items. That was probably one that we held on to because we just didn't know what quite to do with it. So it hasn't seen any action, though. It did get an edge back on it.
Yeah.
Since we had it. So,
but this is a Western, from the Western Knife Company. Of course, there's only a few knives out there that are going to ever use leather wrapped handles. This is an aluminum handle down here, and which is a great lightweight handle. And only that I know of, the new production Western case and K-bar will have a leather wrapped handle, and they tightly wrapped the strip of leather around the handle, and these they need to be treated every once in a while. This one's getting probably dry, but it's not too dry yet. But that leather wrapped handle is just such a comfortable feel, and you'll notice that when your hand's on it, it doesn't slip in that leather like a smooth plastic knife can allow you to do. So these were real well received in the military, and hunters have loved these for years. The old case leather wrapped handle knife is one of the staple of the sheath knives, especially in the Northeast of the United States, where they were just if you didn't have a case leather wrapped handle knife, you weren't a deer hunter. I mean, they were pretty
Western
important.
out of Boulder, Colorado. So,
yep.
Pretty cool, and they are neat thinking how they're established in there. So, let's get into a little bit of what a lot of knife owners and users always kind of struggle with, and that's keeping a sharp edge on one of these things. So, Hunter, I want to know, when you pull out your knife, how you guarantee it's gonna do what it needs to do. Because, hey, the most dangerous knife there is a dull knife.
That's right.
Yeah, I typically just use a honing oil and a block sharpener. And,
a whetstone, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Old
cool.
school.
Old school, yeah.
That's what I don't know.
like it.
That's what I grew up doing, and that's kind of how we did it. And I'm more so one of those where I'm probably using my hunting knife a couple times a year only. So it's typically a one time or maybe 2 times a year thing, depending on how much I get out hunting and how much that knife gets used. But I'm definitely not a connoisseur on sharpening. I don't have an arsenal of knives, as Jeff calls it here, but I do have some knives, so I do have some knives.
Well, that is pretty cool. Whetstone, W-H-E-T, stone. I mean, just a really fine. I mean, I know they make different grades of them and things like that, but you put that oil on top and just kind of move it around, and the oil kind of helps float those metal filings out of the way. So you keeping that edge on there, because there is a difference between sharpening a knife and honing a knife. And a lot of people mistakenly use those terms interchangeably. What's the difference?
Well, is that a question? Are you asking a question?
That's a pregnant pause right there.
A what pause?
A pregnant pause.
A pregnant pause, waiting for somebody to deliver.
If that's where you want to go with it, yeah, sure.
Have you heard that term, Kayla?
I have, yes.
Hunter?
No,
Thank
I
you.
haven't.
You've never
Thank
heard of
you.
pregnant pause?
No, it must be a
Oh
Nebraska
my
thing.
goodness.
No,
Or an Iowa
no,
thing.
not a Nebraska thing.
It's just the learned right there.
Okay, if that's what we're going to call it. But anyway, pregnant pause. Okay. Are we done pausing, or is it, how long does a pregnant pause last?
I don't know how long you're going to get out of this bit, but you've got just a couple more minutes
Yeah.
overall.
So, what was the question? We're still pregnant pausing.
Different. no, you delivered. It was unfortunately it was a stillborn, but.
What is the difference between a honed knife and
Yeah.
a sharp knife?
Do we want to?
honing and sharpening?
A sharpening knife is from a dull edge. Okay, if when your edge is dull, you've got to sharpen a knife. Now, I still maintain that sharpening a knife requires actually honing it to the end. But once a knife is resharpened, or you've set a good edge on the knife, honing it is just reopening that edge, or redefining that fine edge so that it stays razor sharp. And so that'd be my statement from that pregnant pause.
I've used the terms interchangeably, so apparently I don't know the difference. But
The non-learned over here, yeah.
But now you Googled it. What does it say?
no, I Googled the pregnant pause, and
Amen. We're still not sold that you
What
guys
does it say about a pregnant pause?
mastered the English language. Let's put it that way.
it gives the impression that it will be followed by something significant. So I don't know if that was a pregnant pause.
And you just dropped it. I mean, you just. Oh boy.
Yeah.
I've always
Okay.
seen sharpening as, like you said, putting a new edge on.
Yep.
And honing can be the end part of that. Honing is just kind of keeping that edge as sharp as it can be. So if you have a knife that you've used a couple of times, just to make sure that knife stays sharp, you hone it. You've got something you can use on your hand. You can use the steel, something like that. But to actually sharpen it is oftentimes when it needs a new edge on it. It's either curled over, it's rolled over, there's a nick in it, there's a break in it, and you've got to reset it. You are taking off. Instead of just making that blade, or the edge straight again, just nice and straight, you're actually having to take off part of that knife. You're getting rid of some of the steel to reset an edge when you sharpen. That's always been kind of the way I've looked at it. Because you've got some,
I think you're spot on.
Yeah.
you got some hand tools where you can keep it honed, and it is one of those things, folks. I'm a big believer. If you can stay with your knives maintained and where all you have to do is hone, wonderful. Because once you get to the sharpening stage, it takes a little bit more. It really does. So better maintenance is truly an ounce of prevention in that case. So.
I probably lose most of my knives before they get to the resharpening stage. My arsenal's across the Midwest here.
I was gonna say that's where not many of my knives have I gotten attached to, because lose them, find something that catches my fancy a little bit better. I'm very utilitarian when it comes to knives. I do like neat looking knives. There's no doubt about it. But I'm very much, how does it grip? How does it work? And once it starts getting some dings and things in it, then it's on to the next one. So
Yeah.
so how do you sharpen yours?
It depends on the knife. Most of my knives, for the longest time, I'd use carbide blades. You know, those little kind of a V carbide blades that overlap each other, and then you just bring the knife right across the center. And then those work really well. There's no question that those work. You can get those steel carbide blades, or there's those little white rods that you can
Ceramic and
and whatnot. And ceramic generally does more of a honing than setting a new blade, whereas carbide takes a lot of steel right off the blade, and if you don't have the right angle, it'll set the new angle for you. And those can work really well. And I've gotten those pretty razor sharp. Stone, yeah, I grew up using a stone. I was taught to use a stone to get a nice maybe 30-degree angle on a knife. But I can tell you right now, to me, stones just take longer than I'm willing to put into it. I remember, having relatives who were sitting around talking on the farm there, and they're just sitting there just as they're, and a half hour later, they're still just working on that stone. Yeah, and you're sitting there thinking to yourself, yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. So anyway, whereas a couple straps across the carbide cutter, and it'll open them up nice and sharp. Now, Hershey kind of got me into the what's that workbench?
Work Sharp.
Yeah. With the little straps. Just plug it in, and the straps just. Oh yeah, that's.
By the way, we have one around here. Keep your eyes open for it. It went to some workshop, and I'm not sure which one. But it's in a tote somewhere.
Well, that thing, because again, all knife sharpening systems, have room for error, right? And so what we're trying to do is make sure we reduce the room for error. And that thing gives you a lot of room for error. I like it. It gets a nice blade. It works better for longer blades than short little pocket knives. I'll say that much. But I can return a knife to just about a factory edge with that pretty easily.
Well, I think one of the toughest things that a lot of folks have trouble with, me included, is getting that angle. You mentioned 30-degree angle. I know there's certain ones, fillet knives, sometimes it's even a little sharper, so that it just depends on what you're trying to do with it.
Yep.
Because again, if you set it a certain way, it's super sharp, but it doesn't last as long. A different angle, it might not be as sharp as it could be, but it's going to last you for a while, type stuff, a trade-off. And so a lot of those now that allow you to set the angle already, you just kind of rub it up against. Great. Now, folks, I will say, and we don't get any sponsors for Hunt Nebraska other than the sportsmen and recreational shooters here in the great state of Nebraska. Be careful with your fillet knives. Because as you're using that work sharp and you're drawing it across, that little tip on most
gets rubbed right off. Doesn't it?
That nice.
The blade disappears.
The tip does. I can tell you, I've struggled with this one, and I've kept the tip, but it was even sharper than this at one point.
We've got some in our arsenal that no longer have a tip. I mean, you can open up that fillet knife, that 7-inch fillet knife over there, and that one is a little rounded. But it burns it right off.
Yeah,
because you are taking steel. And again, that's one thing that you got to keep in mind. Even if you're using those carbide blades, every once in a while, knock the steel filings out of it. Rinse it, wash it, whatever it suggests you do. Oil is a great way. You got to get rid of those steel filings, because as you bring them across those actual sharpening blades of the carbide, it'll start getting in your way. It'll start grilling. In fact, we had some really cool little pocket ones for a while, Hunter, for our Hunter Ed instructors, and you could see if people had been getting rid of those steel filings, or you could flip it over and you could just see where it was starting to crust and build up, and because they do come off not only sharp but hot. So do keep that in mind. Now, one thing I learned, and I really didn't think about it, I think I learned this online somewhere, but we did this in one of our original podcasts, Jeff, is if you ever find that you'd like a little extra edge, and this isn't going to completely put a new sharpened edge on it by any means, but if you need a little honing and you got your vehicle nearby and no sharpener or pocket sharpener like a lot of these come with nowadays, roll your window just part the way down, and that little beveled edge on the glass of your side windows on your vehicles can serve almost like those carbide blades do. Their glass is hard. And it'll help kind of smooth that out. It's amazing, and it actually does work. So we're not going to have time to get into all the different things, and maybe in the fall we can talk about which ones to use for squirrel and which ones you use for deer and what part. Because deer, I don't know if there's one perfect one. There seems to be a lot of different things you're doing with deer. If you're just field dressing it, if you're skinning it, if you're deboning it, that type of stuff, or even just cutting steaks. Turkey season's upon us. Which of these you guys use when you're successful on a turkey hunt? Right to the fillet knife.
Right, the fillet knife. Yep.
Kayla?
I find the fillet knife too big. It kind of gets in my way. It's just too big for me, so I like to go with the shorter knives. I think that's a Buckmaster knife that you have down there, maybe 3-4 inches or so is about my knife length of choice.
All right, Hunter.
Similar to that, yeah. I have had some. I know. Growing up, I got a big 4-inch, real thick steel blade buck knife that my uncle got me for Christmas before I turned 12, and I think the first time I'd field dress a deer, I used that thing on it, and I cut my hand up, and took me a couple of years to learn my lesson. So typically a 3-inch straighter blade on turkeys, and I pretty much stick to one knife and kind of an all utilitarian. I'm not, like I said, but after this, I might have to invest in some more knives for more specific tools for the job.
Now, I'll never forget the first time I really got to use a knife. It was a fillet knife. We were filleting up a bunch of crappie at a local pond, and from a distance, from the boat ramp, guys were walking up. Hey, your first time filleting crappie, huh? It's like, yeah. How could you tell? That's because my dad went back to the car for more Band-Aids, and we had to take a trip into town. Sharp knives. I do like the fillet knife. I will say. Now, this is one of those things, though, and we're in Nebraska, right? Can I say that? I know in hunter education we talk about how to field dress. There's videos and pictures of how to field dress a turkey. How many of you guys really field dress a turkey before you get home?
Yeah.
Not me either. I think that's a Midwestern thing. Now, if I was on a turkey camp and I was there for several days, then
Sure, different story.
If it's going to be warm. But at the same token, a lot of my hunts, if I'm successful, I'm an hour away from home or thereabouts, and I'll drive it there, and then I'll just debone it and take care of it. If I don't have to deal with turkey guts, great.
Yep.
That just makes it so much more enjoyable.
Exactly. I don't like turkey guts. They stink.
And I've got a few fillet knives. I don't know if any of them are here. Oh yeah, little ones. This is, and certain ones I do like the flex, and there's some that are 4 or 6 inches long. The longer ones, I'm kind of with you there, Caleb. But I love the flex of getting around that big weird keel bone. Isn't it weird that keel bone on a turkey? I mean, it doesn't look like that butterball that we think of and have pictures of every November. It looks more like a meat tent. The very tip top of it is the top of the keel bone, and it just drops away. But there's that little groove right on top. I don't think any other bird has that we hunt. And there's a way to curve right around that with a little bit of flexibility in your blade and get all that meat you can if you're going to debone it that way.
Yeah, so. And I think, you kind of hit on something that, when it comes to turkey hunting, turkey used to be going to a turkey camp, right, in Nebraska, because we'd go to the areas of the state where we had the most turkeys, right, Niobrara, the Pine Ridge, places like that. And so, we'd completely clean out a turkey and be at camp for maybe 3 or 4 or 5 days. Today, we're going out. We're an hour away from home, sometimes less than that, considerably less than that a lot of times. And we harvest a bird. We don't need to, do a lot of work in the field, so we bring that bird home and do all of our work there. Especially anytime I'm filleting the breast off of a bird, the fillet knife is just perfect for that because you can get right up against that keel, and of course that spine allows you to just razor edge right off the keel, and so you're not wasting any meat whatsoever. And of course, all the joints you need to cut, you just learn where to make those cuts, and a fillet knife will make all those joint cuts as well. One thing you'll notice if you'll use a fillet knife a lot for that work is this last third of the fillet knife gets dull, where it's razor sharp back here, and so you need to learn to sharpen that fillet knife so that this front third of the knife and the tip stay sharp, so that you're not losing that. Because when you think about a lot of the cutting that you're making, it's right up in this area here. So, but the knife I use the most for game animals, what doesn't matter, is my fillet knife, and I've got a couple different fillet knives that I just absolutely could not be without. So.
There you go. Cool stuff. I know we're kind of run down. I did want to give out, you talked about some of your friends that had built some knives for you. This is one that I brought in. This is from Brian Hefner, one of his privately made knives. He does this. He's one of our archery mentors, and every year he makes some for the graduating participants in that program. Some homemade, handmade knives. That is actually one of the Brian Hefner leather sheaths as well, which is pretty darn cool. And I know his goal is to have the youngsters that graduate from that program moving on, put that to use. It's a very usable knife. Boy, I bet some of them just have it sitting there on their desk or on the wall or someplace cool.
Well, it's so pretty. You don't want to use it, but it's so much great utility to it. You look at this knife and you go, it just, every time somebody picks up a Brian Hefner, they want to hold it. They just want to hold it because it feels so good in the hand, and just such a nice, and again, talking about a blade, you just don't need a big blade. What is that, 3.5 inch blade right there, 3 inch blade? It's just a beautiful little knife. He does a great job.
You remember growing up, Jeff, you're probably the only one that does. What knives we thought we needed to survive.
Oh gosh,
in the wild.
yeah. Rambo came to knife. Yeah, I mean, if your knife didn't have stuff in the handle to survive, you had no business carrying that knife into the deer woods. That was my philosophy.
The bigger is better mentality.
Oh man,
it goes away after you make some.
Rambo showed us how to use knives. But it's funny, Hershey, you say it had a compass. I had a couple of them.
did.
Compass, and I had a fishing kit in there just in case I decided I need to catch a fish.
And it was mine came, I think, with 3 waterproof matches.
All three of them,
You
huh?
thought, hey, that's pretty cool. And if you've ever tried to light a waterproof match, there's some skill involved with that. And usually, after the first one, you're going to break. There's just no way around it.
One
So
thing
the
I
two are
came to
back
the
up.
conclusion after trying to put my survival knife, my Rambo survival knife, to use, is that I was likely going to go without fire and fish if I had to survive on that knife. So it was going to be something else that knife was going to provide me.
Any idea what kind of steel went into that knife? Because I can tell you mine. I think that there was probably greater steel in the window frames of our house than there was.
Yeah, it might have been a shiny aluminum now that I think about it. I'm not real sure. They weren't made for cutting as necessarily, but they were sure cool. And you could put them on a sheath and you just thought you were the
Well,
coolest
they
thing.
had to have the extra
intent.
little string down on the tip to tie it around your
Because
just
about a
above your
foot long
knee.
knife dangling on your leg, it just wasn't the thing.
Oh boy! I wonder how many of those made it to the deer woods. Probably more than a
I
few.
know one did, and then I learned. I'll never forget it because my buddy out in western Nebraska, Trent Smith. Trent made this knife. This is his one of his
Nice.
knives and sheath. He does a great job, incredible job, really. We were to bone out a mule deer that we'd got out there by Hyannis, Nebraska, and I'll never forget his dad coming back out there to the shed where we were at, the big garage, and made some comment about a hack job that we had done on that deer, and he looked at the knife and he just shook his head and walked back in, and I think he got about another 20 pounds of meat off that knife, or off that deer. So I don't remember how old we were, maybe 12, 13 years old, but we learned right away we did not have the right tool for the job, nor did we know what we were doing. But
Makes it easier when you do. All right,
man.
folks, we're gonna have to put a bow on the knife talk today. Again, give us a like, give us a thumbs up so you know when the next one drops. Until then.